You're listening to TGI Sports Talk with your host, Keith Angle, on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everybody. Keith Angle for TGI Sports Talk in the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. And we certainly want to welcome our viewers on Zodiac TV. A lot of great stuff going on Northeast Streaming Sports and Zodiac TV, which certainly affects this show and all of my viewers. We're going to be on so many outlets now. So we've got Zodiac TV, we've got TGI Sports Talk on both Facebook and YouTube, and we've got Northeast Streaming Sports on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and all the podcast stations like iHeartRadio, Spotify. Pretty much anything you can think of, we're there. So keep joining, keep watching. I thank all of you for joining me each Friday morning, each Sunday morning, each whatever morning I'm on now. My schedule seems to keep growing. Good morning, Dave Guyette. You finally made it back to number one in the room. Congratulations. Not a bad day here in East Greenbush, guys, compared to what we've had recently with some snow and some sleet. We are still the only live streaming sports webcast in East Greenbush, New York. So thank you for that. We're growing leaps and bounds. The followers have doubled in the last, 2 months, 6 weeks. So I thank you guys for that. I thank the groups that allow me to share this too, these interviews too. And, you know, if this is being shared, there's something relevant for you. I want to thank my guest from last week, Larry Sorensen, former Major League pitcher with the Brewers, the Cardinals, the A's. Larry got around a little bit in his career, and I want to thank him. It was a great interview. He's now the broadcaster for Wake Forest baseball and football. He's the color commentator. So with that said, what I want to do is bring in today's guest is Darold Knowles. If you saw my little promo, Darold pitched a long time in the major leagues, also pitched with a lot of teams, and very well. Left-handed reliever. We'll talk a little bit about how that came about. I guess he was left-handed from birth. I guess I won't ask him how he became left-handed. But I would say Daryl's biggest claim to fame, and maybe he'll dispute me, I don't know, would be being part of the three-time world champion A's from 72 to 74. Certainly a colorful group. And we'll get into that and all of Daryl's career and see where we go from there. So let me see if I can get Darold in the room. Good morning, Darold Knowles. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning. Glad to be here.
Excellent. I appreciate you coming on my show today and bringing some of that Florida warmth up here to us old folks in upstate New York. So, Darold, let's talk about. I mean, you grew up in Missouri, right?
Correct.
Brunswick High School. Ended up going to the University of Missouri. I mean, what were your aspirations? Did you think you were going to be a major league pitcher? What were you thinking as growing up and playing ball in high school?
Well, from the time I was old enough to remember, I always wanted to be a major league baseball player, and I grew up listening to the Cardinals in Missouri, and I just never thought it was not going to happen. And I was lucky enough, had some ability and come out of a small town like Brunswick you're talking about, but I had success everywhere I pitched. Obviously, I wasn't playing against pro caliber players at that point, but it just blossomed, it mushroomed, and I was able to do what I had to do and just moved up the ladder, and it all worked out.
You know, it's funny. I had Mark Littell. I don't know if you remember the name Mark Littell. He was from the Brunswick seems to ring a bell. He wasn't from Brunswick, was he? Was he from nearby?
He was from, why do I want to say Sikeston, Missouri or something like that? He was from Missouri somewhere, but he wasn't Brunswick. No, Brunswick. No.
Maybe something came up in his early career where he crossed paths with Brunswick. Maybe that's what it was.
Possible. Yeah.
He was a fun interview. He was a character too. Good major league pitcher as well.
Yeah, for a long time, yes.
So I'm assuming you pitched at the University of Missouri.
Actually, no. That's kind of I went to the University of Missouri one semester is all, and and I actually dropped out. I didn't want to. It sounds terrible, but I didn't want anything to do with college. I just wanted to play ball, and So I did. I dropped out. My grades were terrible anyway. I had no interest in it. But they always say I went to the University of Missouri, and it sounds like I'm this big scholar or something, and that's not the case. Not the case.
You know what? You learn more in the school hard knocks than you learn in this classroom, in my opinion, anyway. At least things that are life important, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, all right. So you spent a semester at Missouri, but you get signed by the Orioles. Why the Orioles? Were there other organizations interested, or?
Well, back then there was no draft. I mean,
right.
I had a few clubs following me, but this one scout who was with the Orioles by the name of Byron Humphreys, he always followed me. He was everywhere. Everywhere I'd go pitch, he would be there. It seemed like, and finally, he offered me a contract, and I wound up taking it. And he took pretty good care of me. I signed for $5,000. Back then, it was still a lot of money, but it was a lot of money. And he put a little clause in the contract that if I got on a major league roster, I'd get an extra $2,500. And after 1 year, I was put on the major league roster, and I had success in the minor leagues everywhere I went. And as I said, so it allowed me to just move up the ladder, and it all worked out.
Well, you did play in the minor leagues. We talked a little bit before we came on, not too far from me. It's, I guess, maybe 3 hours. Rochester, with the Rochester Red Wings, who I think are still there. I know there's been some
There's a club in Rochester, but I don't know if they're called the Red Wings anymore or not. But back then it was Baltimore's AAA, and I think now it's the Minnesota or somebody. I'm not even certain.
How much time did you spend there?
1 year, actually 1.5. I played 1 year there, but I pulled a hamstring real bad and tried to pitch with it all year, and it just didn't work. I was in and out and didn't have a lot of success, but I did when I was healthy, but when I was hurting, obviously I did not. But then I went back the next year, and then they called me up, and that was the biggest thrill I ever had in baseball. Obviously, was going to the big leagues, but
sure.
And I wasn't really successful the first time I went up, but I was bound to go back. So,
did you have? Was Earl Weaver one of your managers in the minor leagues?
Yes, he was. When I played Double-A ball, he was the manager, and great guy. I mean, you talk about a fiery guy. Obviously, everyone knows that, but Hall of Famer, and he was a good baseball guy, and we all learned a lot from Earl. Even though, I mean, half of it was you knew when he was going to get mad, and he and the umpires didn't get along, but it didn't matter,
So you would say that the Earl Weaver we came to know as the Orioles manager for a long, long time. He was the same guy back in 1993 or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. And at that time, I mean, were you a relief pitcher then, or were you a starter? Because I know you had some starts here and there through your major league career. But what was the path for Darold Knowles then?
No, I was always a starter in the minor leagues, and then when I got to the big leagues, it was just back in those days. Everybody kind of started in the bullpen when you got to the big leagues, and you worked your way back into the starting. And I wanted to start because I'd done that all through my minor league career, but right away, my first full year in the big leagues was with the Phillies, and Gene Mauch was the manager, and he just stuck me in the bullpen and made me a closer, and so it kind of stuck, and I loved it. I loved being in the game at the right time, and that was when it's on the line, that's when you want to be there.
So at that point in time, your aspirations to be a starting pitcher kind of disappeared.
But I didn't really have a choice. I mean, it was. The one good thing about being a reliever, you have a chance to pitch every day, and I didn't mind that at all. I liked that, so it's a little different than it is today.
Well, you did very well once you get in there. The advantage you had as a reliever, at least as the game evolved, and I'm sure it wasn't. Well, maybe it wasn't that much different then. I mean, when you're left-handed, you got an advantage as well because there just aren't that many good left-handed pitchers around. It seems.
No, and being left-handed probably kept me in the big leagues a couple of years longer because I had great success against left-handed hitters, and obviously being left-handed, and so that kept me around a little bit. But the first 13 years, if you will, I didn't care whether they're right-handed, left-handed, whatever. It didn't matter, and
Well, you certainly handled yourself well. You talk about your time in Philadelphia, and you did kind of come of age there. And again,
Right.
we talked about Earl Weaver. You played for another iconic manager in Gene Mauch.
Yeah.
Maybe for different reasons in a lot of cases, but Gene Mauch managed for a long time in the major leagues and he didn't ever get the ring. But what was it like playing for Gene Mauch?
Gene was a different type guy, and I didn't care who managed. It was my first full year in the big leagues. I was just happy to be there. But he and Jim Bunning used to always go at it, and Bunning was not a big fan of his because he just didn't think Gene handled pitching well, even though he was a great manager and he could handle the game well. But Jim wasn't happy with the way he handled all the pitching. And for me, I didn't care because he let me pitch. And
Yeah.
He threw me out there, and he kind of made me be the closer that I was, and that I became, I should say. But
Yeah. Well, those first couple of years in the majors, you only spent a year in Philadelphia and a year in Baltimore, but I mean, you played with some great players. In Baltimore, you had Brooks Robinson was there, and Boone Powell, the young player, Louis Aparicio, and you get to the Phillies, you got Bunning, as you mentioned, Richie or Dick Allen. I'm not sure what he was called at that point in time. I don't remember.
Well, yeah,
but
we called him Richie back then.
Yeah, he was kind of a I'm not sure mercurial player, right?
He could hit.
Yeah, he could certainly hit the baseball. Who are the influences as you were growing into your career now? These first couple of years, you mentioned Gene Mauch making you reliever or whatnot. Were there other coaches or players that were influential in your development at that time?
Well, after the year I spent in Philly, I got traded to the Washington Senators, and Gil Hodges was the manager there, and he kind of really blossomed my career, if you will, as a closer. Because I remember I went to him in spring training and told him I wanted to start, and he set me down. We had a long talk, and he did most of the talking, but I realized that I was going to be a reliever. I was going to be their closer, which I was, and it turned out perfect. And I kind of think back on it, I think they must have known more than I did, and I didn't want to admit that at the time, but it certainly was that way.
Well, when you get to Washington, your career really, I mean, you had pitched well in Philadelphia, as you talked about, but you get to Washington, your career really blossoms. You only got to play for Hodges for a year, isn't it? Was it?
Yeah, because then he went to the Mets, but the next year, I think it was the next year, 67, is the year that I wound up having to go to Japan, and I was in the military. And
thank you for your service, by the way.
Oh, thank you. It was a great experience. I certainly didn't want to go over there. I was just now becoming established, if you will, in the major leagues, and then the Air National Guard unit I was in got activated, and I wound up in Japan. I was on active duty for 18 months, but I still pitched a little bit when I was at Andrews Air Force Base. So before I went overseas,
I was going to say you didn't really miss a full season, right?
Well, no, I would go to the base in the morning and then go to the ball game at night. And I pitched, it seemed like every day I was there. I think I was in 30 some ball games in a half year. And, but it was a strange time because there was the Vietnam War was going on, and I could have wound up there. But luckily I did not have to go there.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
So, and in Washington, as I said, you really blossomed. And in fact, you had an all-star year in 1970. Is that right?
69.
69. What was that like playing with all-star games then? And I guess they are today, but they don't feel the same. Maybe it's because we see the guys every day on Sports Center. There's games around here every night. But back in those days, all-star games they felt special because as a fan, you didn't get to see all these players. And you weren't playing against the guys in the American League as a player, right? Like they are today. What was it like being around that?
I remember sitting in the clubhouse and looking around, and you see all these guys, and they're all stars, and I felt very honored just to be a part of them, and did not even imagine I'd pitch in the game, but I did wind up getting in the game and facing a couple of hitters, got them both out. So but just to watch him, and Frank Howard, by the way, was on that club too. Hit a couple. I think he hit. I know he hit one home run. He might have hit two in that game, but it was a different time, and I don't know, because it was in Washington, which is where I was playing.
Yeah.
And when I remember coming in the game, and that's the biggest applause I ever got in my life. And it seemed like every fan there was a big Washington Senator fan, and they really they brought me in right and made me think.
But I know it was a long time ago, but do you remember who the two guys were you got out?
Absolutely, Matty Alou and who's the shortstop for Boston Red Sox back then?
Oh yeah, Rico Petrocelli.
Rico Petrocelli, yeah. I think those are the two I faced. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, you would think you'd remember that that moment in your life, right?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy? I mean, your time in Washington. I mean, it was probably your longest stint. Oakland was close, but I think it was your longest stint with a club, and you obviously played for multiple managers and people with different personalities. I'm sure Ted Williams and Gil Hodges were kind of worlds apart, but
they were that. Yeah. Ted, I've always said has more. He had more charisma than any man I've ever met in my life. He was not the best manager at that time, but it was like I couldn't wait to get to the ballpark every day just to listen to him, and just to think that Ted Williams. I mean, he was bigger than himself. I mean, he could walk in a room and just take it over and never say a word. And he was not, like I said, at that time, he wasn't the best manager I ever played for, but he was certainly the most interesting.
You know, it's funny. It seems like great players, just to go sideways here a little bit, it seems like great players often don't translate into great managers. And I always wonder why that is. I mean, there's been some. I don't want to say nobody ever has, but it seems like it's hard. And I don't know if it's because they expect too much of their players or they're too aloof. I mean, I know I've read about Ted Williams that he was a little bit aloof, and you can probably speak to that better than I can, obviously. And he wasn't really. He didn't have the best interpersonal relationships with the players.
No, he didn't.
Does that sound right?
I will say this about I mean, Ted knew hitting, obviously, and
sure.
And when people would talk to him, he'd say, "I know about those pitchers. I know about pitching, but he knew how to hit them, but he didn't know how to handle them, and at that time. But I will say, to his credit, he got better. But he would go help the opposing hitters, and we used to always get on him. What are you doing, he very colorful mouth. I mean, he'd curse. Oh, bad. But he was different. He was different. But it's a great chapter in my life. I'm thrilled now that I got to play for him. I'll tell you how smart I was. I played for him there and talked to him a million times. Never got his autograph.
Oh, no kidding.
I wasn't very smart back then. I mean, I have a picture with him, but I did not get him to autograph.
Well, I guess in that kind of that relationship, I mean, it doesn't seem natural just to go up and to ask your boss for his autograph. Probably, I'm guessing it doesn't come to second nature, like if you were a fan that ran across him.
Well, that's probably true, and that was probably the case. But I know a lot of guys did, and I just didn't want to. I don't know. I took the stance. I didn't want to bother him. If I needed something, I would ask him. But the press was all over him everywhere. I mean, and rightly so.
Yeah. Well, these first 5-6 years of your career, you're not playing with teams that are competing for pennants, unfortunately. And that all changed with the trade to the rising Oakland A's at that time. They weren't quite the A's that they became, but you get traded in a big trade with. I know Mike Epstein went in that trade, and Don Mincher came the other way. I don't remember all the pieces of that trade. You might remember them, but. I do. What were your thoughts about that trade?
It's funny you asked, because I was very upset when I got traded, because I was, how do I say this correctly? I was like a big guy in the bullpen, if you will. And I was the guy, and I knew going to Oakland I was not going to be, and I was very upset. They had this other guy with this curly mustache that kind of got all the save opportunities, but
He was okay, right?
Yeah, he wound up okay, but he would. I was out there about a week or 10 days, and I think it just kind of hit me. Hey, this club's got a chance to win, and I'd never, in my years, the year with the Phillies, we competed, but obviously didn't win. Washington, we never had a chance to win, just wasn't that good. But all of a sudden with Oakland, we could see that we did have a chance. Good, you talk about good young ball players. I mean, that whole I was just like a spoke in a big wheel out there, but it all meshed together, and with Fingers being the ace out there, obviously, and then I was the guy that kind of set him up, if you will, most of the time. He got 30 saves, I'd get 12, so but he was a fun guy, and he still is, and he's still a good friend.
Well, the guys, that's good to hear. And those guys who set up guys like Fingers, like you did, I mean, those are huge parts of the ball game too. I mean, you can't get to Fingers without holding the guys. I mean, I get crazy with some of the stats today. Maybe we'll talk about a little bit later. But I mean, guys who are in your position today, they get stats called holds, right? And it's one of the most infuriating stats that's ever come along for me, because you're going to have an 8-run lead and give up 7 runs and you got a hold. And I don't really understand how that's a successful outing. But
I feel the same way. I don't quite understand all that stuff, but
it's frustrating. So the A's, obviously, as I said, you come to a more winning atmosphere as they're on the rise and they make the playoffs your first year, and you do get swept by your old team, the Baltimore Orioles.
Exactly.
But you could see that team had something, and it was just a matter of time before they broke through. Did you feel that way in '71 that this team was gonna win?
Absolutely. I mean, even back then, you knew that with the pitching we had, and obviously the stars in the field, and you're talking about guys like Reggie and Rudy and all. I mean, Bando, Campaneris, all those guys. Dick Green, who was probably one of the most important guys on that team, because
great defensive player, right?
Oh, great defensive player. But anyway, you knew that they had a chance, and they were going to compete as long as that team stayed together. And luckily, the next year we did, even though I wasn't part of that World Series team. But
yeah, you got hurt that year.
My last game of the season, it's kind of embarrassing, but I broke my thumb, my left thumb. I was hitting and hit a ball. It was in extra innings, actually, and I thought when I hit the ball, I thought that's going to be a base hit, and I tried to hustle I was going to go to second and get a double, and I slipped coming out of the batter's box and stuck my finger down and broke my thumb. So I missed the playoffs and World Series. So, but that was probably the roughest time for me in my whole career, because I thought, here we got a chance maybe to play in a World Series, and I'm not going to be a part of it. So,
yeah, that had to be hard. I mean, that was an exciting World Series. I remember that very vividly. I mean, I was fairly young yet, but it was. I remember it very vividly. I mean, it seems like every game was 1 run or close to it, and the team really came through. Reggie didn't play in that World Series either, right?
No, he did not. In the clinching game of the playoffs, he tore his leg up and scoring on a play, and he wasn't. Yeah, he didn't play either. But it was the ball club rose above Reggie and myself, even though Reggie was probably a bigger part of it than I was. But I had a great year that year, and as did Reggie and everybody else. But he made a big show out of it when he didn't when he was introduced. He actually, I laugh, and I love Reggie. Don't get me wrong, but when they introduced us, even though I was there for the introductions, but with a cast on my arm and everything, and Reggie come out on crutches. And
I remember.
Yeah, and as soon as he got back in the dugout, the crutches were gone. It was crazy, but
well, Reggie was a different kind of character.
He was. He still is. He's a good player.
Was he a good teammate? I mean, as a Yankee fan, I mean, I know of his time here, and I know of his time, obviously, in other places, but you didn't seem to hear. I know, and from reading, I know things did go on in Oakland similar to what went on in New York. What was your relationship like with Reggie?
Reggie was fun. He was just back then. He was a little more egotistical than he is now. But I made a quote, and it turned out to be quite big. But I actually said to him, I said, "There's not enough mustard in the world to cover that hot dog." And about 5 years later, it's printed in the paper or something. But Reggie remembered it. We talk about it every now and then.
Darold, listen, you should have copyrighted that statement because people have been using it for players ever since.
You're right. You're right.
If you had made a quarter for every time that's been uttered, you'd be.
I know.
You'd be living at Mar-a-Lago now. The other thing I want to chat about quickly about in '72, you were still with the team during the playoffs in the World Series, as you mentioned, right?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit that series with Detroit before they got to the to the World Series was pretty. There was a lot of animosity going on in that series, and there was a famous incident with Bert Campaneris and Larry LeGros. What's your recollection of that? Did Billy start the whole thing? I mean, what was your recollection?
Well, was that year when Campy threw the bat? Was that 72?
It was 72. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that game was in Oakland. That game you're talking about, and Campy just had a great game. He was doing everything and stealing bases, base hits. I think he might hit a home run. He just took over that ball game, it seemed like. And then when LeGros hit him, and it was obviously everybody knew it was Billy. Billy ordered him to do it, but that's Campy. Campy doesn't. Again, I love Campy too, but Campy doesn't. He didn't like pain very much. And
no.
when that ball hit him, he just erupted, and then
like, he didn't even think about it.
No, but he missed part of the playoffs after that too, and so we were probably lucky to win that playoff. But, Gene Tennis came up big in that last game, and then he obviously had a great World Series. So
came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, for the nation. I mean, people in Oakland probably knew Gene Tennis, but around the nation, I remember that first game of the World Series. He hits 2 home runs. Even at my young age, I'm like, who the heck is Gene Tennis? But he became a household name after that. Obviously,
he did. So. And you know what? It kind of really allowed him to take off. After that, he was always in the mix, and he contributed a lot. Believe me, he was one of them, along with Reggie and Rudy and Tennis, and it was.
There's so many great players. So many great players on that team. You always leave somebody out just because there was a great player.
That's right.
The pitching staff was amazing, both the starters and the bullpen.
It was, and there's 3 Hall of Famers came off of that club, and probably a couple others that could be talked about, but I don't think Rudy gets enough credit from the days he played, and then Fosse was a pretty stabling catcher, the last 3 years there, and I mean he took care of the pitching staff, and it all went well. But we got to remember one thing: the manager was a guy by the name of Dick Williams, another Hall of Famer. And
he played for some great managers, man.
I did, and he was probably my favorite of all time. And
what made him separate him from the others?
Well, he would let you play, but he demanded you play the game the way it's supposed to be played. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't, he would let you know. And everybody respected that out of him. And nobody questioned anything he ever said. But he was the leader of the ball club, and as rightly so. But he could handle pitching. And I think when you have great pitchers on a ball club, as many as they did in Oakland back then with Vida and Cat and Fingers and Blue Moon and all those guys, it just
Darold Knowles. Don't forget Darold Knowles.
Well, I was happy to be a part of it, but he knew, and nobody ever got tired. He could take care of everybody, and that was the best. If there's any questions, he didn't not run the game. He always was in control, and I think and he wasn't a big Finley fan either. I'll tell you an interesting story where Charlie used to come to the games occasionally. He'd sit up in the boxes, and he would call down to the dugout and tell Dick he wanted him to do something. And for some reason, I was just happened to be in there. I don't know whether I'd gone to the restroom or what, but I was in the dugout and the phone rang, and Joe Romo, our trainer, picked up the phone and answered it, and it was Finley. And he said, Dick, it's Charlie wants to talk to you. And I remember Dick said, tell him I'm not here. And he's sitting there looking at him, so that was great. But he didn't want to be bothered. When the game started, it was all Dick.
As a Yankee fan, obviously we know all about the George Steinbrenner years and his interference with managers and whatnot and calling dugouts. But Charlie Finley was George Steiner before George Steinbrenner. It feels
right.
like.
We couldn't. We had like 3 different uniforms, and every day when we were home, we couldn't get dressed until Charlie called. He'd call from Chicago, tell her, well, we're wearing green today or something. We always had to wait. It was crazy, but you know what? You got to give the guy a little credit too. I think he put together a pretty doggone good ball club, and he was, even though he was colorful and nobody liked the way he did things, but it was all winning, and that part he did well.
I've read a lot that one of the things that contributed to the team doing so well over those years a thing that united the team was their hatred for Charlie, and that helped them because they hated. You guys had you shouldn't say hated each other. You had some issues at different times. Different players had.
There were some issues. Yeah, there were some all those fights and everything you heard about. I'll go right on air right here and tell you they're all true. They all happened. But when the game started, everybody played the way it's supposed to be. So.
And was that united front against Charlie? Was that something that really brought the team together?
Well, it started the year before with Vida after he had the great year, and then he held out, and Charlie didn't want to play. And that kind of started. But then after we won it in '72, and he gave us a nice World Series ring, we got, and when he gave us the ring, and you've probably read this somewhere, but he told us, and everybody remembered it. He said, "Win it again, and I'll make that ring look sick." Well,
I did.
We did win it again, and that was the year of Mike Andrews thing when he tried to release Mike Andrews during the World Series, and everybody backed Mike and went against Charlie and made it public known. And so when he got the rings, there was not even a diamond in the ring. And I've been to the Hall of Fame. Have you ever been there? I'm sure you have.
Oh, yeah, many times. Many times.
They have all the rings in that case. That's the only ring in there that doesn't have a diamond in it. It's crazy. But, so everybody, that made everybody go against Charlie.
Let's talk, since we're talking. So before we finish with Charlie, there's a question. I was going to bring this up anyway. When the owner paid the players to grow mustaches, and let me put a little picture up here quickly of we could see that. Here's you, Darold, before you got your mustache, and I guess I can't change it there. Let me see if I can find. You can see one here where you've got your mustache. Did you grow it just to get the money, or?
Well, I'll tell you the whole story on this thing. It all started because of Reggie. In spring training, Reggie, you've probably heard this, but Reggie. I want to hear you tell it though. Reggie came to spring training with a beard and a mustache, full beard mustache, and back in those days it wasn't allowed. You're supposed to be clean shaven, and he went to Dick Williams was telling him you got to get rid of it, and he asked me, he said, could I keep it? And he said, you can keep the mustache, but you got to get rid of the beard, which he did. But when the season started, he was supposed to shave it off, and he didn't. And so a few of us just said, well, we'll start growing them too. And so we did. And I think we were in Milwaukee and played a game, and then we're going home, and Charlie was on the flight, and he loved the mustaches. I want everybody to grow them. And 4/5 of the team said, no, we like growing them. And then he actually said, I'll give everybody $300 to grow one. Well, the next day, the clubhouse guy and every bat boys and everybody are growing mustaches. So And he did. He gave everybody $300.
So were you one of the ones that did not want it?
Well, at the beginning, I wasn't going to grow one, but when it started, yeah, we all did. I was one of the guys that started. I got a pretty heavy beard anyway, and it came in pretty quick.
So did Charlie? I mean, did he really like the mustaches? Because I know one of the versions of the story I heard was to, mitigate Reggie's flagrantly breaking the rules. He just said, "Well, I'll have everybody grow," and then Reggie's impact is going to be lessened by that much.
Well, I don't know what Charlie was thinking about it, but I don't know whether he liked him or not. But he thought it was a big deal. Then he had everybody at the ballpark. I think that there was some deal that if you grew a mustache, he let you in the park free that day.
There was an event like that.
Yeah. But so he was probably smarter than everybody thought. But anyway.
And it was certainly magnified by the fact that, again, in '72, you played the clean-shaven,
exactly.
two-shoe Cincinnati Reds. So
they build it the hairs versus the squares.
Right. One of the great lines. Another great line. Was that Monty Moore? I don't know who made that. Do you know who coined that?
I do not know, but I thought it was a great line. Yeah.
I feel like it was Monty Moore. I don't know why.
That's possible.
Anyway, you win in '72. You don't get to participate. It's a horrible time for Darold Knowles. I mean, I'm sure you're happy the team won, but it's got to be hard not to participate, as you said.
It was tough.
But in '73, the team plays, again, very well, gets to the World Series. And another great World Series against the Mets, who it's hard to believe they were even there.
I know.
Even today. Great pitching. But Darold Knowles sets a World Series record, since tied, I think, by Brandon Morrow. But at that time, you were the first pitcher ever to pitch in all 7 games of a World Series.
I couldn't believe that. But I just wanted to make sure I got in one ball game in that series because everybody wants to say I pitched in a World Series, and I was lucky enough. I think I relieved Raleigh and got the save in the first game, so I was tickled to death. And then I obviously got in all of them, but I didn't really. I always thank Gene Tennis because Raleigh was pitched with 2 out in the 9th in the 7th game, and I didn't even know until that morning. It was something in the paper that if by chance I would get in that game, I'd be the only guy to ever do it at that time. But Gene Tennis made an error with 2 out in the 9th and allowed me to get in the game. I always thank Gino for that.
Was it exciting to get that last out of a World Series?
That's the biggest thrill I ever had in baseball, ever, in any capacity. Yeah, that was something. I didn't even I faced Wayne Garrett, who's still a good friend of mine, but he popped up, and I didn't even see Campaneris catch the ball. I was ecstatic. It was great. It's a great memory. Biggest thrill I ever had.
Yeah, and you talked about the turmoil that kind of surrounded that World Series as well with Mike Andrews and Dick Williams. So I've heard another version. The version I've always read is that Dick Williams decided during that series and the whole Mike Andrews thing to resign after the World Series. I've heard a story since that he'd given his resignation weeks and weeks before. Now do you have any recollection of being anything different than version A?
I only remember version A because after that happened, we're in New York and he had a meeting and said that win or lose, he was going to resign after the series. Now, whether there was something other than that, I don't know. But that was the first anybody heard about it, and I just assumed that's the way it was.
And were you guys was the team really willing and able, or not willing and able, but were you ready to sit out a game if this didn't go the way you needed it to?
No, I don't think so. But my wife just handed me a note. Is that true?
In March.
About Wayne Garrett. Is Wayne Garrett passed?
March.
I did not hear that. Did he?
Well, she just passed me a note said he died in March, and I was not aware of that.
I'll take a quick look here.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick look. Great TV when Keith looks stuff up. Wayne Garrett. Let's see.
Yeah.
It's funny if I miss that. I usually catch these.
Well, He lived in Sarasota. I'm in Dunedin, Florida.
March 19th.
My wife
Really?
was saying it was on March 19th.
That's funny. Baseball Reference still has them alive, which they're usually pretty good.
Wow. I don't know. I'm with you, but well, let's hope not. Hope that's incorrect.
Wikipedia still has him alive too. So Wayne, we hope you're still with us.
Yeah, Wayne, we do. Sorry I brought that up on air here.
That's okay. That's all right. We never know. We're all day to day, so who the heck knows?
Yeah, that's true.
We might have had breaking news here. That's okay.
It might have been a different Wayne Garrett. I don't know. Hopefully, but
Yeah. Well, I'll look into that deeper, and I hope not, because I did. I wasn't a Met fan, but I liked Wayne Garrett actually.
great guy. Yeah.
I did root for the Mets in that World Series. I'm sorry to say, but it's
A
hard
lot
to
of
do.
people did, I think. I mean, they had a great pitching staff. I mean, they really did, and Seaver and Kuzman and Matlack, all those, and Tug McGraw.
Yeah, and fortunately, you guys could match them pretty much man for man, though. So that was
True, very true, and I think it might have been different, but they brought Yogi brought Seaver back on 3 days rest to pitch Game 6, and which we won. He wasn't the true Tom Seaver; didn't have that greatest stuff right then. And if they'd have given him one more day's rest, it might have been different. You don't know.
Yep. It might have been, right? Might have been a different Game 7 for sure. So we moved to 74, and Dick Williams obviously resigns, and you've got Alvin Dark now, and yet another different personality. My gosh, it seems like every manager you played, it could not have been more different than the last.
That is true. That is true. We didn't have a manager until like 3 days before spring training started.
Yeah. What was it like playing for Alvin?
Alvin was a great baseball man and obviously was around forever. Very highly respected. I didn't see eye to eye all the time with Alvin. I'm sorry to say, and probably because I didn't pitch as well for him as I had in the past. But I always felt it was because he didn't pitch me as much, and I don't know. It's just we had a difference of opinions, but he was. I tried to handle him with respect. I think he tried to do the same thing. He was a religious guy.
Yeah.
And so, but he was okay. And you know what? We won. And I know some guys said we won in spite of him. And there were some games where he did things different than what, let's say, Dick would have done.
Yeah.
And some of the guys, not me, but some of the guys would speak out about it. And the writers loved that stuff. I mean, they would, they pick up on it, and it was just added to the Oakland A's aura, if you will.
Even through all of that, the team wins their third straight World Championship, first time since the Yankees in the 50s. Right. And I think it's only the Yankees have done it again since then, I believe.
That's probably true, yeah. But that was a short series. I think we won that in 5 against the Dodgers, and Mike Marshall, the great Mike Marshall, but only pitched 106 games or something that year. Can you imagine that happening today? No.
Oh my gosh, jeez, you kidding me? It's I guess we'll touch on it quickly today. I mean, how is it for you to watch the game today as compared to when you played? It's so much different, especially from a pitching standpoint, right? Starting pitchers are trained to start looking for somebody to come and get them after 90 pitches. I mean, it's a frustrating watch.
It is. The game has changed, and as an old timer, if you will, I'm not a big fan of it. All the stats and all this stuff that they're the analytics, and to me, how do you take a pitcher out because he's how about the guy last year in the World Series? Even they did.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, that was big. I'll never be forgotten. But I'm not a big fan of it. Now they're playing 7-inning doubleheaders and put a guy on second base, and it's just the change in the game.
It's not baseball anymore at that point. No. I watch. If you watch a game that goes to extra innings, and Todd Stottlemyre kind of said this to me as well. I had him on the show, and he's like, "Well, once it gets to the 10th inning, I stop watching because it's not baseball anymore."
That's right.
Right.
Well,
so I go on and on. Geez, I do my vlogs and I rail on this stuff all the time, so I probably shouldn't pull you into my sphere, my sphere of influence, where I'm getting shot down by the younger generation. Thinks it's awesome, right? That
Well, Eric Wedge, I'm sure you know who Eric Wedge is.
Sure.
He used to work with the Blue Jays when I was there, and he always said they just keep messing with the game, and he said it's very disheartening, and it is. But and he's now the head coach for Wichita State, I think. So.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Well, good for him. He was a good manager.
Yes. Yeah, good guy. Good guy.
It's funny, before we get away from the changes to the game. I mean, it's fun. It didn't just start either yesterday. I mean, going back to your time, every rule change has been designed to help the hitters and negate the pitchers, starting with lowering the pitcher mound in 68 or 67. I'm not sure which year it was, but
I think it was 68.
Yeah.
68, 67, 68.
You lower the mound, then you got the DH.
It was after Bob Gibson had the great year, and they lowered it the next day. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I think in the American League, there was only one 300 hitter in the American League that year, and that was Carl Yastrzemski. I think that's correct.
He won a Triple Crown, I think, that year.
Yeah, that was 67 when that was. Yeah.
Oh, 67. Right. Yeah. I do remember he led the league with like a 301 average. Yeah.
Exactly. It was the only 300 hitter. Yeah.
Yeah. And not just that, but then the DH comes in, and then the baseballs change, and everything has been against the pitchers. So I'm not just saying that because I got a pitcher with me here today either.
That's all right. I appreciate it.
So listen, as you move through, I certainly don't want to shortchange the rest of your career. I mean, after you move on from Oakland, you're still a good pitcher with Chicago. You're the closer there, and you had some good careers. Played with some great players there.
Absolutely.
Bill Madlock, I know you played with. Rick Russell, some great players. Anything that stands out as your time in Chicago?
I remember I was there 2 years, and the first year, Don Kessinger came up to me and he said, "At the end of this year, you'll be more exhausted than you've ever been in your career because all of the day games, and he was right. It was tough that first year because all day games, and the next year I had the worst year I've ever had in baseball stat wise, and the next year I put a curfew on myself. I changed things. I did things a lot different, and I came back and had a good year, and then they traded me after that. So.
Yeah. Well, you did actually, when you got traded to Chicago, you actually did get traded for a Hall of Famer. So
I did. That's right.
Billy Williams. So you've got that going for you. And when Chicago moves you go to Montreal. And I didn't know this actually until I was doing a little bit more research, because I like to dive in a little bit and find little nuggets. You didn't like your time in Montreal.
Well, first of all, I got traded to Texas first, and then I went to Montreal.
Was it Texas first?
Yeah. And then I wasn't – we had a great club in Montreal, great club. Yeah. But my family at the time, I had a couple of kids and a couple small kids at the time, and it was just French speaking, and I just said, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to go back to the States. And so I played out my option. I was 38 years old, played out my option.
So you were a free agent, and you signed with the
club I always wanted to be with, the Cardinals. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did it feel to finally, after all these years, I don't know, 15 years, whatever it was.
Yeah.
You finally come full circle when you play for your childhood favorite.
I finally got to where I wanted to be, but I knew in my heart, I knew I wasn't the same pitcher that I was earlier. That slider wasn't quite as – I can remember being on the mound going, dang, they used to miss that, and now they're hitting it. And I was running out of gas, and I got as much out of my career, I think, as I could possibly gotten. So I remember every pitch, and I don't regret any of them or anything.
You got to play for Waddy Herzog then too, a little bit too. Again,
no, I
thought you did.
No, he wasn't. Kenny Boyer was manager when I was there.
Didn't Herzog didn't come in that last year you were there?
Yeah, but I'd already gotten let go.
Gone. Yeah. Oh, you'd left. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, you missed another great manager.
I did, but I've known Whitey forever, so we used to go hunting together all the time. So.
Another guy who's totally different than all these other guys we just talked about, right?
True. They all have their own personality, I guess.
Dick Williams was your favorite, though?
Yes, he was. Dick was my favorite.
How about the teammates you've had, and again, we talked about it through this hour, that you've played with some great players, played with a lot of Hall of Famers, and every team you played on, even in Washington where the teams weren't that good, you had, as we talked about, Howard, and other good players. I mean, who was the best player you feel like you played with?
I've been asked that so many times, and I don't think I could honestly answer it. I'm sure I'd leave somebody out, but you're right. I played with so many guys, a lot of Hall of Famers, both pitchers and players, and obviously I'm not one of them. But I got to say the Montreal club was probably the most talent-rich club, and we didn't win it that year I was there, but I think we finished second. But when you look, they had the outfield was the Hawk, Andrew Dawson, Warren Cromartie, and the big
Ellis Valentine. Ellis
Valentine. You had Larry Parrish, Dave Cash, Gary Carter, another Hall of Famer, was the catcher. Yeah. I mean, that was all
young guys too.
Exactly. But that they didn't stay together very long. I don't know whether it's because the Canadian thing or what it was, but
well, Dick Williams was your manager there too, so
he was.
How about, what if I ask that question a different way? Maybe it's not any more fair than the one I just asked. Is there a guy, because Richie Allen always comes into my head, Dick Allen comes into my head, of guys that didn't get in the Hall of Fame that you feel like have been slighted a little bit? Is there anybody that comes to mind, or people, it doesn't have to be one guy?
He would probably be the one guy that stands out. But well, I don't know. The guys that deserved it seemed like did make it. Guys like Carter. Gary Carter is the best catcher I ever threw to. A lot of people have asked me that, and he had a thing about him. I don't know. Fosse was good. I was lucky. In Washington, it was Casanova. Remember Paul Casanova? Remember that name?
Yeah, sure.
Jimmy French. They were there. The good catchers.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate. I mean, of course, these guys are major league ball players. I guess you can say they're supposed to be good, and they were. It was great memories.
And would you say, we talked about it during this conversation, is 69 when you made the All-Star team, was it your favorite year, or was it one of the years with the A's, or maybe a different year? Maybe it was your years with St. Louis. I don't know.
No, my years at St. Louis, like I say, I was fading out. So
only because you got to play for your hometown team, I guess.
That part was favored, but which I feel is one of the best pitching years I had was I'm trying to think what year it was, but Ted Williams was the manager. I'll lead up to this, and he came to me early in the season in the outfield, and he said, every time we are tied or have a lead going into the seventh inning, he said, I'm giving you the ball. You're going to be the pitcher. Well, I loved that. I thought that's great, and he did. And my record that year was 2-14.
Yeah.
But I had a low 2 ERA and had a lot of saves. But
saved like 27 games, I think.
Yeah, I had a good year, which was good, but the record obviously was not indicative of that. But it seemed like every time I gave up a run, I lost a ball game, and that's exactly what happened. So. But that was one of the best pitching years I ever had.
Yeah. Well, they handled the relief pitchers differently then too, obviously, as we just talked about a bit. And, you're going to get more losses if you're coming into the high leverage situations and earlier in games, and not just to start innings. I mean, they didn't baby you guys and give you every opportunity.
No, they got the most out of it they could.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons today that they do. They maybe these guys are paid so much and they're afraid they're going to lose them, so they just kind of baby them a little bit. And I never did agree with it, but the way it is.
Well, before we go, and we're running out of time, but I want to touch quickly on your coaching career. I mean, you were a longtime pitching coach and for several organizations in the minor leagues, and you spent a year, I know, with the Phillies, at least a year. with the Phillies. 2 years at the major league level. I mean, was that something you enjoyed? Do you wish that you'd spent more time in the majors, and you did it till just, I don't know how long ago, just before COVID? You were still
a year ago, yeah, just before COVID. 60 years in pro ball I had. I think I kind of felt like that was enough, but no, I enjoyed coaching. I was lucky. I knew when I was done as a player, I knew I was done. I didn't have enough, so I wanted to stay in the game. And back then, it was a little bit different because we didn't make as much money in the big leagues as a player, and a lot of us needed a job, and I was lucky enough to stay in the game, and I was only with 4 organizations, and I only got fired one time, so I think that's pretty good.
Was pitching coach your?
I was always a pitching coach until the last three years with the Blue Jays, and then I was the rehab pitching coach, if you will. So, did
you have any aspirations to actually manage a club, or was pitching?
I never wanted to manage. No,
you saw enough. You saw enough of what your managers went through that you didn't want to.
Yeah, I was happy to be a pitching coach. That's right.
Well, listen, Daryl, I appreciate you being with me today. I've had a great time with you this hour, and I will tell you this: I think you should probably loosen up your arm and get in shape, because there's a lot of teams can use lefties, and you could probably still go out there and make $5 million a year.
Well, I threw batting practice up until a couple of years ago, so every day. So I always told them, guys, said, you can still pitch. I said, well, move that mound up about 5 feet and I'll try it.
Oh, gosh. Daryl, thank you so much. If you want to chat, I'm going to wrap up the show. If you want to chat for a minute, or you got to run, I understand. If you want to chat for a second, once I'm done.
I got to run. But I've enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. I had a blast this morning. Thanks again. You have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye. Darold Knowles. What a fun hour. That was really a lot of fun for me. I love that era. As you guys know, with some of the guests I get on Friday mornings, this is kind of my nostalgia hour for the most part. And I love getting the guys like Daryl on, and what a great career he had. I mean, underrated, under the radar. He was a main guy on some teams that weren't as good, and when he was on the better teams, he was, setting up for the guys that were the stars, if you were. But guys like Darold Knowles, as you know, from my opinion, guys on this show, whether they're pitchers or whether they're utility guys, or the Greg Pryors of the world that I talk about a lot of times, and I seem to talk about Greg a lot. One of my first baseball guests, Greg Pryor. But these guys make teams go. So I love it when they come on. Great stories, great recollections, and I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I do. And I hope the groups that I share to this too, I hope you'll share the show with your friends. And I hope you'll follow TGI Sports Talk, follow Northeast Streaming Sports, and watch us on Zodiac TV. I didn't get a chance to put my banner up for Zodiac TV today. Bad me. I want to welcome the Zodiac TV viewers that are still with us, and we'll see this later. Big news for Zodiac TV, by the way, going live on April 30th on many streaming services. So we'll have more news about that, and we could be part of their big launch show. Some of the personalities on Northeast Streaming Sports may be part of that big night for them. I want to thank again Daryl for today. I want to thank again Larry Sorensen for last week. Coming up next week, Mike Heath, former Yankee, former Tiger, very, very good Major League Baseball player, played catcher and played around the field quite a bit during his career. But we'll have him on in 2 weeks. Last 30-game winner in the Major Leagues, Denny McLain. So we're going to have some good stuff coming up. We're going to see you Sunday live at 9 a.m. with our Stream of Consciousness show. Bring your topics. I want you guys to give me some topics to chat about. Don't forget April 29th. Only less than a week now. The NFL Draft. I'll be on with Mac and Jack from the Mac and Jack Show. We'll be live on Northeast Streaming Sports, on Zodiac TV, on YouTube, on Facebook, on all the podcast channels that we mentioned. Look for us then. Keith Engel for TGI Sports Talk. You have a great day and a great weekend. See you Sunday.